I'll do the invitation chant after these announcements. First of all, I'd like to give great thanks to those devotees who came for Seva Saturday, these past 2 Saturdays. When you come on July 4th, you won't really know just how much was accomplished because you didn't see the before. But the after is so beautiful and so gratifying. So thank you so very much to all of those who came these past 2 Saturdays and worked so hard and accomplished so very much. It was gratifying to see, and as I say, the place has been left very beautifully for those of you who come physically on July 4th. And all of you who have been fully vaccinated are most welcome. You may wear a mask if you wish, but it's not required. So our July 4th celebration will be starting at 11 a.m. on that Sunday. There will be short talks about Swami Vivekananda and Swami Prabhavananda, both of whom very consciously left the body on a July 4th. And then there will be some readings, some songs, and just celebration of the nation in which we live, and of ourselves, if you will, for being, for having survived this pandemic and having come together. Now, I'd like to invite readers and singers for that day because there will be songs. And you don't have to be physically present to either read or sing. If you are going to read or sing, please restrict your reading or song to no more than 5 minutes. No more than 5 minutes. So that's July 4th. Short talks, readings, songs, general air of celebration, and then, of course, we'll come in the monastery and share a potluck lunch for those of you who can be physically present. During the month of July, we will study Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga, the yoga of meditation, contemplation, concentration, and meditation. And then in August, the center will be closed. In September, of course, then we will take up Jnana Yoga. Are there any announcements that I might have made that I did not think to make? Anything at all? Okay. Or just an afterthought. For those of you who haven't yet visited our new website, please do visit the revised and improved, much improved. It isn't just revised, it was completely renewed. And you will see there the memorial page for Swami Yogeshananda, very touching. And many other, what I just feel are wonders of the design and spirit of that website. All right. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti, Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So the topic this morning is Sri Ramakrishna's Karma Yoga. And here is a little context from centuries earlier than Sri Ramakrishna lived. It is this poem by Hafiz. You will see the relevance of the poem to the talk and to what the master says. This is such a beautiful poem. Hafiz, each soul completes me. My beloved said, my name is not complete without yours. I thought, how could a human's worth ever be such? And God, knowing all our thoughts, and all our thoughts are innocent steps on the path, then addressed my heart. God revealed a sublime truth to the world when he sang, I am made whole by your life. Each soul completes me. Now, because, as I said, this offers context for what we're going to be discussing, I'm going to read the poem again. Each soul completes me. My beloved said, my name is not complete without yours. I thought, how could a human being's worth ever be such? And God, knowing all our thoughts, and all our thoughts are innocent steps on the path, then addressed my heart. God revealed a sublime truth to the world when he sang, I am made whole by your life. Each soul completes me. As I said, that will become very relevant. You'll see the relevance as we go on. But just as our usual preface to just put everything in perspective for what we're studying today, June has been a month for study of Karma Yoga, a spiritual path leading to the abandonment of selfishness. As a karma yogi, you practice offering your actions and their results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings to the divine presence. Even before fully knowing this presence, you hold firmly to the belief that the presence is within each person or other living being that you interact with or serve. Working and abiding in this spirit, you are increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and their results. This yields the freedom and contentment promised by Karma Yoga. As Sri Krishna says in chapter 2 of the Gita, even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. So as I said, the topic this morning is Sri Ramakrishna's Karma Yoga. Manifestation. Manifestation means making that which is potential unknown and passive, actual, evident, and active. This is the goal, this manifestation is the goal of all our spiritual practices. Swami Vivekananda said, manifest the divinity within you, and everything will be harmoniously arranged around it. I'm going to repeat that because, again, this is a central idea of what we're about to look into. Swami Vivekananda said, manifest the divinity within you, and everything will be harmoniously arranged around it. Now, what I'm about to read is the key thought, the key principle of Sri Ramakrishna's Karma Yoga. It's from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, chapter 22. For those of you who want to look it up, the full note is in the notes that will be posted with this talk, but it is something he said on Saturday, May 24th, 1884. Master to the devotees, I want to tell you something. A change has been coming over my nature. You are devotees. I have no hesitation in telling you this. Nowadays, I don't see the spirit form of God. He is revealed to me. He is revealed to me in human form. It is my nature to see the form of God, to touch and embrace him. God is saying to me, you have assumed a body, therefore enjoy God through his human forms. God no doubt dwells in all, but he manifests himself more through man than through other beings. Is man an insignificant thing? He can think of God. He can think of the infinite, while other living beings cannot. God exists in other living beings, animals, plants, nay, in all beings, but he manifests himself more through man than through these others. Is man an insignificant thing? He can think of God. He can think of the infinite, while other living beings cannot. God exists in other living beings, animals, plants, nay, in all beings, but he manifests himself more through man than through these others. As some background for where we're headed next, each of the yogas we study is a step-by-step system of practices that can enable you to manifest that divine spirit abiding within. Karma Yoga focuses on action. Its methods engage how and why we act and encourage you to think differently about the results of your actions. Swami Swahananda, the Swami who sent me here, Swami Swahananda often said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. So Karma Yoga thinks and encourages you to think differently about the results of your actions and to therefore change those actions. Karma Yoga tells you very specifically what to do to produce, as you succeed, remarkable changes in your behavior. For those of you who want to know more about Swami Swahananda, there's a little introduction to him in the notes. I won't take time to read it this morning. according to Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna took karma yoga to a new and higher level when the master taught, serve jiva, the human being, serve jiva as Shiva, serve the individual human being as the divine being. In the book Realizing God, Swami Prabhavananda tells the story of what Narendra, of course, is the future Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Prabhavananda tells the story of what
Shankara, you are frozen.
Yes.
Okay, it's frozen for everybody.
For
It's
me.
frozen screen.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's frozen for everybody.
maybe he can't see us.
He's not looking.
Cyndi, are you there?
I am. I mean, no, I'm not at the center. No.
Do you know why the thing's broken?
He just disappeared. It probably just was buffering. You know, sometimes you have to really make sure before you start a meeting that you've cleared out your cache and everything, and that there's a bunch of different factors that could cause it, but he'll probably be logging in back in any second now.
Okay.
Or calling me. I've got my phone right here. So stuff happens.
Do you think he can still see and hear us?
No, he's gone. He's left the meeting, but he can rejoin it.
Huh.
Yeah, I think he has to reboot, start all over.
So who here has practiced karma yoga and had some success with it? Nobody?
Well, yeah, it's part of, for me, and I think maybe a lot of us, but for me, it's part of my practice. It's definitely, how can it not be? You know, it's how can it not be part of a spiritual practice? But it goes very much with also Christian teachings about seeing the divine in others, especially others that are really struggling and that might be overlooked otherwise. That it doesn't matter what shape they're in or who they are, anything about them, we all have the divine in us waiting to be served and acknowledged and loved. And yeah. How about you, Tom?
Sometimes.
Brother Shankara is back.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Shankara, you're muted at the moment. Just need to unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Okay, now am I back?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we had a power outage. That's what happened. And so let me find my place here. We're about to hear what Narendra, the future Swami Vivekananda, actually heard and saw when he concluded that Sri Ramakrishna had taken karma yoga to a new level. So Swami Prabhavananda tells the story of what Narendra actually heard and said. Quote, "Here is how Vivekananda learned the ideal of service. There is the ideal of philanthropy, but what he taught was not philanthropy. It was something completely different. This we misunderstand. Narendra was with the master one day when Ramakrishna was repeating the teachings of another great saint. What he was repeating was, quote, compassion for mankind. Compassion for mankind, the master said to himself. And then he thought, compassion? 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 No, why should I be compassionate? Is not everyone God? Serve, 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 serve God. Vivekananda came out of the master's room and said to some of his, Narendra, Vivekananda to be, Narendra came out of the master's room and said to some of his brother disciples, I have learned something today, something unique. If I live, I'll give this truth to mankind. And here is something composed by John Schlink and Bill Davis and presented at Vivekananda Retreat Ridgely for the first time, years and years ago. It's called The Living Forms of God. As I say, it's by Bill Davis and John Schlink. Bill Davis comes first because he's the one who wrote these words. Quote, here are the living forms of God. In every face, behold the Lord. Serve Jiva as Shiva. Serve Jiva as Shiva. How better to worship God. How better to worship God. This service purifies the soul. Service purifies the soul. What a rare privilege to serve Jiva as Shiva. How can one be proud when one has been given such a privilege? One feels overflowing joy to have this sacred privilege. Shiva works through Jiva to serve Jiva as Shiva. The fortunate one who can serve in this spirit will realize Shiva. So I'll read it again. This is called The Living Forms of God by Bill Davis and John Schlink. And of course, there is a musical version of this. Here are the lyrics. Here are the living forms of God. In every face, behold the Lord. Serve Shiva, serve Jiva as Shiva. Serve Jiva as Shiva. How better to worship God. How better to worship God. This service purifies the soul. Service purifies the soul. What a rare privilege to serve Jiva as Shiva. How can one be proud when one has been given such a privilege? One feels overflowing joy to have this sacred privilege. Shiva works through Jiva to serve Jiva as Shiva. The fortunate one who can serve in this spirit will realize Shiva. Now, before we go on, I think it's worth taking time to ask for any comments or questions from anyone, because we're about to go on into the particulars of how this might work as a practice. So anything about what's been said so far about this conceptual aspect of it, the principles. We'll go on to the practice in a moment.
Brother Shankara, Somesh here.
Yes, Somesh.
So now I'm in my mind, now I'm lost, like what's the difference between God and human, like, or man? So is God like all forms combined is God, or there is something different? Because that's what you said, is that, you know, God, like every human is part of God. Like somewhere
Every
you said,
human is God.
is God.
Every
Okay.
human is God. And not their personality, as we'll go on to talk about in the practices.
Mhm.
Not the personality, not the small self, the ego-based aspect, but that which animates,
Mhm.
as is said in the evening hymn. Speech cannot hold thee, nor mind, yet without thee we think not nor speak. It is the Atman, it is Brahman that is in every being and every action. Now it's called in this context Shiva. Shiva and Shakti are two names for Brahman and Kali, or the divine feminine, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. But within each human being is, the concept here is that within each human being is a fuller manifestation of the divine presence than in any other living being. It's in every living being, but it's more manifest in human beings and
Okay.
more accessible, therefore.
Mhm. So when Ramakrishna said that now I, you know, from the spiritual form, I see the physical form. That means that he sees God in every living being, be it
Every
human.
human being, especially.
Spirit,
Yes, every living being, but every human being,
Right.
especially. That the divine presence is more manifest in human beings than in any other form. And that was the form that he was seeing rather than the spirit form of God. That's what he meant when he said there'd been a change in his nature.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a very good clarification question. I'm sure others shared that same. What is this exactly?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Shankara,
Yes, dear.
good morning. This is Vijay.
Yes, Vijay.
First, that God is not in any human being. God, or every human being is God. But then we go beyond the human being to every living entity, and every non-living entity also is Brahman. And it all depends upon what state we are operating at within our mind. My mind is in flux all day, every moment, from moment to moment, and it can be at different levels. Right now, I may be operating at a very practical level of dealing with the world, and an hour from now, I may be at a more spiritual level, and my mind would be relating to other people in a different way. So it all depends upon what state or stage my mind is operating at any point in time during the day.
As you say, Vijay, this instruction we're about to receive in terms of the practice is how to keep your mind focused on the fact that every human being that you deal with, whether it's on a practical level or on any other level, in the everydayness of working with other human beings, when one sees that other human being as the divine being and deals with them in that fashion, serves them in that fashion, everything is transformed. So there is no differentiation. There is no flux. It becomes as the image is of oil being poured from one container to another. There's a continuous, unbroken flow. or a candle burning in a windless place. It does not flicker. So this is the intention, to establish within ourselves, first as a stand we take, then as a reality that we experience, that the divine being is within every other human being, and for that matter, every other living being, but especially in human beings. And because we interact mainly with human beings, we serve those human beings. In everything we do, we serve them as the divine being. That's the intention. So this helps curb and eventually eliminate the flux that you were talking about.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Speaking of the candle flame not flickering, that is a difficult part for me. And in practice, if I'm having a conversation with Thakur, then I have no problem keeping my mind focused on Thakur. But if I'm doing only silent prayer, then it's very difficult for the candle flame to not flicker. The mind starts going places very fast.
Well, this is true of all of us. Vijay, it's the nature of the mind to do this. This is why we learn through the practice of contemplation, concentration, and meditation to sink below the level of the thoughts, so that there become fewer and fewer thoughts, fewer and fewer interruptions, and ultimately we end up abiding in that divine, that sacred silence. But this takes years and years and years of work, decades. But so the fact that the mind flickers, this practice that we're about to discuss is how to keep the mind, even when it flickers, we return it to this idea, this stand that we take, until it becomes an actual experience that we are interacting with when we're interacting with other human beings. We're actually interacting with the divine being.
Thank you.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I wanted to clarify one thing. You said not philanthropy, but serve Jiva as Shiva. But there's compassion behind philanthropy also.
Well,
Isn't there compassion that leads you to philanthropy?
Sri Ramakrishna said, first experience God. First know God. Then you'll know what to do with your philanthropy, with your compassionate responses to other people's needs and so on. First know God. And of course, this is the same thing that Christ said when he said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. The knowledge of what to do with your wealth or charity or whatever would be one of those things that's added unto you. So philanthropy is a lesser thing in Sri Ramakrishna's estimation, and for that matter in Christ's estimation, than the knowledge of God. So first we seek this knowledge of God. And this is what we're about to discuss, is what are the practices that actually lead to that, that discovery. So thank you, Neera, and good clarification.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Uma.
sorry, I'm coming back after a long time. I was away at the Seva Center for Seva. But anyway, right now what I wanted to say, Swami Vivekananda called it Daridra Narayana. Daridra, the poor, and Narayana, Ishvara. So God, not the poor, God not in the poor, but the poor as God.
Yes.
So Daridra Narayan. And Mahatma Gandhi, when he just came back from London in 1915, he started on a very small basis satyagraha in Champaran, the very small village in Bengal. And that is where he actually addressed the farmers, the poor, downtrodden farmers, as Daridra Narayana. So he saw the face, he wrote in his autobiography that I see you not as people, but as God himself. So
This
that,
is an excellent example
yes.
of putting into action exactly what we're talking about. Yes, thank you, Uma. Excellent example. Anything else from anyone? All right, now we'll go from principle to practice. This practice of serving God in others, serving God, seeing God in others, and seeing them, serving that divinity within others, it begins, of course, as a stand you take. We haven't had the experience of the divinity within the other, but we believe what we've been told, that this by Sri Ramakrishna, by Vivekananda, by Christ, by others, that this, we just heard about Gandhi, that this is in fact the case. So we begin by putting this into practice as a stand we take. Ordinarily, we relate and react to the personality of another person. We do not consciously think about or witness her or his divinity. Yet, when you regularly and faithfully put the ideal of service to God at the center of what you do for and with others. I'm going to read that again. When you regularly and faithfully put the ideal of service to God at the center of what you do for and with others, something extraordinary happens. Both that which is acting, your own divinity, and the divine presence within those you serve become more and more apparent to you. It's like any other practice. It's like any other practice. As Vivekananda said, education is nothing more than the training of the nerves. So, when you regularly and faithfully put the ideal of service to God at the center of what you do for and with others, something extraordinary happens. Both that which is acting, your own divinity, and the divine presence within those you serve become more and more apparent to you. And as Vivekananda promised, life becomes increasingly harmonious. And you can envision why that's so. If you're treating other people as the divine presence and serving them in this way, you can imagine that the inharmonious, The difficult is either it doesn't appear or it's much more easily resolved. So how does this actually happen? Swami Vivekananda said, we are responsible for what we are, and whatever we wish ourselves to be, we have the power to make ourselves. If what we are now has been the result of our own past actions, it certainly follows that whatever we wish to be in future can be produced by our present actions. We have to know how to act. And so Sri Ramakrishna's insight that all service can be service to God and to the highest offers you very clear guidance about how to act and in what spirit to serve. So we have to know how to act, Vivekananda says. Sri Ramakrishna's insight that all service can be service to God, to the highest, offers you very clear guidance about how to act and in what spirit to serve. Swami Vivekananda said, you must remember that all work is simply bringing out the power of the mind, which is already there, to wake up the soul, the power of the mind, which is already there, to wake up the soul. The power is inside every man. So is knowing. The different works are like blows to bring them out, to cause these giants to awake. There is a key, and it's implied in what Swami Vivekananda just said about what's true of you. To change the way you think, speak, and act requires belief in yourself, belief in that power that Swami Vivekananda just spoke of. How to attain that belief in yourself? First, base it on faith in the teachings of the scriptures. Thou art that. The scriptures say it plainly, in many ways, in many places, but never more simply than simply, thou art that, tattvamasi. And on insights such as Hafiz's and Sri Ramakrishna's, plus thoughtful reflection on and analysis of your own life. This is Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana applied in this context. We have these teachings. We know what these insights of these great ones are, whether it be from the Upanishads, Tattvamasi, or from Hafiz, or from Sri Ramakrishna. We have all that. Then we reflect and analyze our own lives. When you do this, as was said earlier, something extraordinary happens. Now, this is from E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings was one of the most innovative writers of the 20th century, particularly the early 20th century. He made breakthroughs in the writing of English poetry, English language poetry and prose that just took the world of the literary minded by storm. And here's what E.E. Cummings said. Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, wonder, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit. Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, wonder, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit. So when we make this attempt to redefine ourselves and believe in what we have redefined, then notice the word risk. We can risk. Of course, change is always a risk. We must be willing to make mistakes. We must be willing to make mistakes. There is no possibility of progress if one is unwilling to risk mistakes. So before we go on to the last words of today's talk, what in the world time is it anyway? Okay, good. Anything from anyone about, we talked about principle, and if you still have clarification about that, that's fine. Or the practice. What is it that you would like to say? Did you like to add from your own experience? Or ask if there's clarification or understanding further needed.
Shankara,
Yes, dear.
would you please repeat the quotes by Swamiji, starting with like, we are responsible?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're responsible. I don't know. Oh, here we are. We are responsible for what we are. And whatever we wish ourselves to be, we have the power to make ourselves. If what we are now has been the result of our own past actions, it certainly follows that whatever we wish to be in future can be produced by our present actions. So we have to know how to act. Sri Ramakrishna's insight that all service can be service to God, to the highest, offers you very clear guidance about how to act and in what spirit to serve. Swami Vivekananda said, you must remember that all work is simply to bring out the power of the mind, which is already there, to wake up the soul. That power is inside every man. So is knowing. The different works are like blows to bring them out, to cause these giants to wake up.
Brother Shankara,
Hang on just a minute.
sorry.
Laurie, is that got it?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, Vijay.
The concept of quote unquote, we are responsible, I'm responsible for what I am. I relate to it very well because I feel very blessed with so many gifts from God. Every single day, I feel the gratitude. But if I'm talking to somebody who is poor, who has lost a job, who does not have enough to survive till next month or to pay rent, and in that, putting myself in that person's shoes, if I'm actually having a conversation, and this is a real life situation, if I'm having a conversation with that person, how would I really bring home the point of encouragement from compassion point of view to make the person feel better because this idea of I'm responsible for what I am is so hard for that person to really be able to relate to.
Vijay, it is not your responsibility to educate that person. If that person asks you for spiritual guidance, then yes. But if they don't, if they simply acknowledge the difficulties that they're in, don't try to educate them spiritually. It's none of your business. Comfort and sustain. Serve that person as Shiva, and that will make a point that you could never make in words. Give
So,
that person some money. Give them some food. Ask, what is it that you need? How may I serve? If you just simply ask the question, how may I serve? And then listen carefully, they will tell you what they need if they're going to be honest. And if they're not going to be honest, then there's nothing for you to do. If they try to pretend that everything is all right, even though you know it's not, then how you can't force yourself on them. And it's not good to try to educate them about the spiritual aspects of their situation. As Swami Vivekananda said, first bread, then football, then the Gita. First material, meeting the basic needs, then mastery of the game of life. Then you can take a look at what the Gita teaches about how we're responsible for ourselves and move ahead. Anything else, Vijay?
thank you so much.
It's
Brother
so important for us to realize that we are not responsible for educating others. You came here this morning to participate in this discussion. As I've said over and over again, none of this is personal instruction for you. You take what you can from it. You take what you wish from it. It is not meant. It is meant to offer you what, by your presence here, you demonstrate you came for. You wanted to hear about Sri Ramakrishna's Raja Yoga. Otherwise, I would not presume to tell you what to do, and I don't presume to tell you what to do. I tell you what is within these teachings. So there were some other people who wanted to say something.
Yes,
Yes,
Brother
right.
Shankara, this is Swayam.
Yes, Swayam.
What I was wondering was when we are in a situation that we need to be served by others, can we divinize the service that we receive and then learn from that? And would that help then to divinize the service that we give?
Of course, dear. Of course, if you see yourself as being served by the divine, what a blessing that becomes. And of course, then you can, so to speak, as in the common phrase, pay that forward. But yes, by all means, see it as the divine offering you what you need. Tom Carr, were you one of the ones who wanted to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let's see. What was I going to? Well, first I was going to say when the power went out, we were talking online about what we did, and Cyndi asked me if I practiced it, and I said sometimes, and then I was saved by the bell because you came back. It's like, I think of it kind of like meditation. Like I'm sitting in the meditation hall. I've gone to the trouble to drive over to the meditation hall. I'm sitting there, surrounded by all these reminders. And in spite of that, a good bit of the time, my mind is wandering off into other things, and I've actually forgotten that I'm meditating and I'm thinking about, whatever, my kitchen or my income taxes. And it's the same with this perspective, the shift of perspective of caring more about other people's happiness than my own. I know that when I do that, I'm happier. But throughout the day, I'll remember it a few times, and most of the time, my mind will be wandering off into thinking of how to make myself happy. Personal story. Right after Catherine died, the months right after Catherine died were some of the darkest months of my life. And I went through a period where I thought, this is it. I'm never going to be happy again. I was never actually suicidal, but I just felt like, what's the use of living? I'm never going to be happy again. And then there was a definite shift one day. I was thinking, well, I'm never going to be happy again, but maybe I should stay alive because I could make somebody else happy. When that happened, everything shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I'm not doing things for other people most of the time. But if I just have that perspective, if I have the perspective that the reason I'm here is to make other people happy, whether I'm doing anything for anybody or not, that changes my basic attitude towards life. And the side effect is that I'm happier. And
Excellent.
so anyway, that's the way it works for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. But a clarification. It isn't that you have to do something to serve someone as Shiva. If you simply interact with them in that way, if you treat them that way, if you are with them as if this were true, you don't have to be doing something for them, so actively performing. If you can, wonderful, if there's some opportunity for service, but simply interact with them in that way. As St. Francis of Assisi said, a kind face is a precious gift. Now that cuts two ways. A kind face, to be able to present a kind face is a gift from the divine within you. Then that kind face becomes a gift to others. So first we begin to think about the divinity within ourselves. That's what I said about reflecting on your own life and what it is that you really are in terms of what these insights of the scriptures and the saints tell us. And when we begin to reflect on that deeply, we see that there is this divinity within us. So, and as Swami Vivekananda said, then the blows of actions begin to allow us to adjust to this truth and present that truth to others. So it isn't as if we have to actively be doing something, although that's a very great thing in itself, but just being with someone as if you are, because you are either taking a stand for it or you know it, that you are in the presence of the divine. What a transformative thing that is. Thank you, Tom, for being, as always, so truthful and sharing so honestly with us about who you are. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara.
Yes.
You said that we must be prepared to make mistakes. That may be true for some of us, but from my experience in life, I find that there are no mistakes. If God is in control of everything that happens, for us to call something that happens a mistake, we're saying that God makes mistakes. And I don't think he does. Sometimes something happens that maybe we don't understand, and we call it a mistake. But I think there's a purpose for everything. And as it happens, we sometimes don't understand it at the moment. And sometimes we may never understand it. And sometimes we do later on see why it happened. But I just wanted to interject that into this conversation.
Thank you.
For consideration.
Thank you, Robert. And of course, from the highest ideal, you are absolutely correct. How can there be anything but immaculate perfection as long as the author is the divine being? And yet, it is our experience, as you just said, that sometimes we don't understand. You know, even the saintly have ignorance. Even Vashishta wept bitterly and for a long time over the death of his sons. And Lakshmana, Rama's brother, looked on this and said to Rama, Rama, this is your great teacher. This is the realized soul that poured out for days this truth of undivided reality to you. And yet he's weeping over the death of his sons. How can this be? And Rama said, oh, my brother, you must understand. He who has wisdom also has ignorance. And so there is no end to the ignorance. There is no end to the Maya and Mahamaya as long as we are embodied. Even Adi Shankaracharya acknowledges this in the last couple of chapters of the Vivekachudamani. Krishna acknowledges it in chapter 2 of the Gita, and further acknowledges it in chapters 4 and 5. Even the mind, even the spirit fully established on the path, even the Sthita Prajna, the soul in perfect equilibrium, can be dragged from the path. So if we do see a mistake, if we do see something that we don't understand, let us love ourselves as the divine being and say, please give me the understanding, or let me live with my not knowing with equanimity. Thank you, Robert. That was so very nicely said. There were two people going to talk. Were you going to say something more, Robert?
No, I was finished.
Okay, then there was someone else.
I was one of them.
Yes, please.
With Marla.
Yes, Marla.
Talk about very much a sort of a practical element to this idea of service. So, for example, about losing oneself in service too much. My little school that I formed, my little Montessori school, from the beginning, it has been a service to, the children, their families, humanity, to God, from day one. And so many of the years I extended myself kind of beyond my own personal resources in this idea of service. And so with children, it's very easy to serve, but with many of the parents, I encountered this attitude of greed, of taking, of I don't want to pay your tuition. I don't, just like, not that they had a need. If they'd had a great financial need, I would have bent over backwards and done everything for them. But people who basically just wanted to see how far, they could push me. And it's interesting that a kind of a fellow Montessorian sort of pointed out that, just as we serve the children, we serve their parents, and we can serve them in the same way as like a compassionate parent. So a compassionate parent sets boundaries on children. And so by setting boundaries on these adults as well, that's teaching them in a very compassionate, doing it as kindly as possible, but it's a service ultimately to them, to the community, to their children, to everyone, and not just to myself, because it felt very greedy for a long time for me to set those boundaries. But I'm able now, more with time, to just see it from a sort of a meta level and see that it's really, if I don't set those boundaries on them, I'm not really serving them.
Very well said, Marla. Of course you have to set boundaries. And when we deal with the divine, the other beings around us as the divine, it doesn't mean that we give them license to be their worst selves. We set boundaries that say, this is the way you need to be in relationship with this. So it's a very delicate thing. There's no two ways about it. It's a very delicate thing, but it becomes less and less problemsome and more harmonious, as Swami Vivekananda said, as you establish this truth within yourself, because you begin to see the appropriate relationship and the appropriate way to behave with each person in the moment, spontaneously, as E. Cummings pointed out. So, yes, Marla, you're absolutely right. And this is what I meant, was gesturing toward when I said mistake. But of course, as Robert pointed out, that can be seen in a different context, and you've come to see it in a different context, and more harmoniously, as you said. Thank you, Marla. Anyone else?
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagirath.
You know what Sri Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara sarva bhutanam ruddeshe junathishtati. God lies within the core of all living beings. Now we may differentiate that we are the highest, but let's not forget, we are highest at this point in time. We are in the process of evolution. And what you call mistake are really our limitations, and we have to be aware of our limitations. We are boundless in our mental energy, but we still have our boundaries. And it is becoming obvious everywhere that we have not fully evolved. And we indulge in self-destructive steps even without being aware that it is self-destructive. And this is the problem that we have to face at this point in time. And perhaps a Vedantic way of thinking might help us. That basically the life on this planet is symbiotic. We live because others are living. When they die, we die too. If we know that, we will not cut so many trees, and we will not unnecessarily kill so many animals, or even the plants which are helping our life, we will not destroy them either. But to know that symbiosis is a very important thing. We have been trusted to help others, but we are not empowered to help others. Who are we empowered to? What is our power anyway? We are going to come, and like a bubble, we are going to burst at any time and go away. But within that small fragment of time, whatever we can do is exactly what you are trying to elucidate and zero in.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Exactly. And You've said it very well. Thank you. Anyone else? Anything at all? Okay, we'll leave the last word to Sri Ramakrishna. This is a quote from the Master. Know yourself, and you shall then know God. What is my ego? Is it my hand or foot or flesh or blood or any other part of my body? Reflect well, and you will know that there is no such thing as I. The more you peel off the skin of an onion, the more skin only appears. You cannot get any kernel. So when you analyze the ego, it vanishes away into nothingness. What is ultimately left behind is the Atman, the soul, the pure Chit, knowledge absolute. What is left behind is the Atman, soul, the pure Chit, knowledge absolute. God appears when the ego dies or disappears. That's from Words of the Master. It's on the first page. So I'm going to read it again. Know yourself, and you shall then know God. What is my ego? Is it my hand or foot or flesh or blood or any other part of my body? Reflect well, and you will know that there is no such thing as I. The more you peel off the skin of an onion, the more skin only appears. You cannot get any kernel. So when you analyze the ego, it vanishes away to nothingness. What is ultimately left behind is the Atman, the soul, the pure Chit, knowledge absolute. God appears when the ego dies or vanishes away. Any final thought from anyone? Anything to add from your own experience or anything to ask for clarification?
I'd like to say something about something that we talked about maybe 2 weeks ago, about meditation and about the chakras.
Yes.
And we talked about dealing with anahata.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some research on it, and Vivekananda says that we should start with the base chakra, Muladhara, and go to Sahasrara. He didn't even mention anahata in directly as a source of concentration, but he talked about Muladhara and how opening it for the Kundalini to rise.
Yes, well,
from there.
That's in 6 lessons on Raja Yoga, and it is a very specialized study, and needs to be done under the direction of a teacher, a qualified teacher. Otherwise, there's danger. But you're absolutely right, Robert. He does say that, and he doesn't mention anahata in 6 lessons on Raja Yoga. But he does talk about what we experience and what we move through. But that study, those practices should be taken up only under the guidance of a skilled and accomplished teacher, which is why Swami Vivekananda was reluctant to write Raja Yoga in the first place. Because there were so few, particularly in his day, there were so few skilled instructors of anything of that kind. Thank you, Robert. You're absolutely right. So anyone else? All right. Om Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Those of you who would like to repeat along with me on this peace chant at the end, please mute yourselves, because what comes through, because there's a delay in the Zoom technology, it's built in, it becomes a jumble. So if you're going to repeat with me, that you're welcome to, but please mute yourself so that it doesn't, that jumble doesn't come through. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. Go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the divine being as our mother and father. Jai, 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 Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma. Any final thought from anyone? All right, dears. Well, next Sunday's July 4th in the chapel, for those of you who can physically make it. Otherwise, it will be Zoomed, just as you're doing. It'll look a little different. Of course, the shrine will be the shrine that we see in the chapel, not this little shrine behind me. And but we'll go forward very much as we go here. It's just we will be in the physical presence of some of our delightful congregation.
But also, Shankara, everybody needs to be fully vaxxed.
Yes, everybody needs to be fully vaccinated if they're going to attend physically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. The next opportunity for us to get together, of course, is tomorrow evening for the Love Poems from God reading and discussion group. Until then, Jai Ma.